Hello everybody, this is Brandon Schollenberger, and today I'm making a little video about a lawsuit over the graph you can see on your screen right now. The graph is known as the hockey stick graph, and it was made approximately 20 years ago to show what temperatures of the planet were supposedly like over the last 1,000 years by using things in nature, like tree rings, to estimate past temperatures. It's been a source of controversy ever since it was made, and the reason I'm discussing it today is the creator of the graph, a scientist named Mann, is currently suing a number of people for criticizing it. One of the defendants in the lawsuit, a man named Mark Steyn, recently gave a deposition, and I want to discuss some strange things he said in it. There's actually quite a few strange things said in this deposition, but I'd like to focus on one topic because it's an important one and it's a clear factual one, which Steyn cites as one justification as to why it was okay for him to call the hockey stick graph fraudulent. Now, on the text, you'll see I've highlighted a bit of the material from the deposition. The deposition is 266 pages long, so we are not going to touch even a small portion of it. But we are going to just highlight a few quick comments on this one topic. Question from the lawyer, talking about the hockey stick. And the reason that you believe it is incorrect or not formatted properly is because it uses incompatible data sets, right? The witness, yes, that's what I say. They are incompatible data sets. Sets of data. Right. One is temperature records and the other are proxy records, right? Correct. Now, there is some back and forth here, but we're going to skip over it to get to what I believe is the clearest explanation of what Mark Steyn believes. Lawyer asks, so I understand, Mr. Steyn, that you have always thought that the hockey stick was incorrect. How is it that you knew it was fraudulent? Well, as many scientists will tell you, it is an issue, and as I said in the Sunday Telegraph, it is an issue when you're using one kind of data, when you're using proxy data for one part of the graph and you're using observed temperatures for another. Then the issue becomes, how do you merge those, the point at which they meet? How do you blend them? How do you smooth them? There often would be a line that stops in 1853 and then a different line in another color in 1837, so that you can see and you can understand that they're different kinds of data. Now, this is a very simple point, and it's a very good point if it is true. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to be. Here is Michael Mann's most famous publication of the hockey stick graph. He has published it in a few different versions. This one is probably the earliest version of the full one. There was an even earlier version that did not extend as far back into the past. But what we can see in any version that he has published is there are clearly multiple lines representing different things. Even in this earlier version, where it's in black and white and pretty small and kind of muddled, the legend clearly states Reconstruction AD 1000 to 1980, instrumental data AD 1902 to 1998. In this version, the most famous one published in a UN report, or rather a report made by a UN committee called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the legend says, data from thermometers, red, and from tree rings, corals, ice cores, and historical records, blue. In either version of the graph that Michael Mann published, we can clearly see there are two different lines representing two different things, and while they are, in fact, overlapping one another, they are clearly distinct, clearly labeled. I don't know what else to say. It just seems Mark Steyn is completely wrong on this account. Let's hop back over. And so, as you know, any honest graph would show that for the more modern era, basically for the span of human life in the post-Second World War era, the tree rings do not track the temperature record. Well, again, that's just not true. they track quite well. In fact, we would expect them to track quite well, because Michael Mann calibrated his proxies to the instrumental record. And if that basically he forced the two to line up over that period, because that's how he was able to figure out how they should look. Maybe you don't like how he did it, maybe there are issues with that, but the fact is, his methodology required the proxy record, which was not just tree rings, by the way, to match with the instrumental record in the calibration period, which was the years 1902 to 1980. So again, it seems what Mark Steyn says just isn't true. Now, of course, a lawyer might be doing this on purpose. He might be trying to trick Steyn into saying dumb things. If so, good on the lawyer, it worked. But whether the lawyer did this on purpose or not, the fact Mark Steyn said these stupid things is, well, pretty bad. Anyway, we're actually going to skip this. I don't know why I have it highlighted. And get back to what we were talking about before, with the lawyer asking, so just so I understand, Mr. Steyn, the basis for the allegation that the hockey stick is fraudulent comes from the fact that there was an obscuring of the intersection between the proxy data and the temperature data, correct? I'm going to go on to the other point, but that's one of the bases, right? Steyn talks about some other things, and then the lawyer tries to get back on topic. Got it. Okay, that's one, I understand that. Another is the obscuring of the intersecting of the data, correct? Mark Steyn, yes. I think the so-called smoothing, as they call it, between the proxy data and the temperature record is dishonest. And furthermore, the fact that it's intended to obscure the fact that the proxy data does not correlate with the observed records. And yeah, we can stop there. I think that's all we really need to highlight. Mark Steyn obviously talks about other things he thinks justifies calling the graph fraudulent during his deposition, but on this issue, he is clearly wrong. He talks about how this is trying to obscure data by hiding where these two lines intersect, but the two lines are clearly distinct. There's no obscuring or anything that he could possibly be referring to. Now, my best guess is Steyn is just being confused and is not thinking of this graph at all. As in, he thinks he's talking about Michael Mann's graph, and in reality is talking about something else entirely. My guess is he is talking about this, the WMO, as in the World Meteorological Organization, statement on the status of the global climate in 1999. Now, if we look in this legend box, we can see there's a blue line indicated for being from Mann et al. 1999, as in from Michael Mann's publication, which he published his hockey stick graph. And if we look in this chart, we can see a blue line that looks a lot like the blue line in Michael Mann's publication. So these blue lines represent the same thing. The only difference, other than how noisy this data might be, is that at the end of this blue line, the data shoots up like we see in the instrumental record, like we see in this red line. Here, we see exactly what Mark Steyn is talking about. The modern instrumental record was grafted, spliced, or whatever you want to call it, onto Michael Mann's hockey stick, and then plotted as a single line with nothing to indicate that there were in fact two separate data sets being shown. That is bad. That is really, really bad. But it's also something that was done in a chart which happened to show Michael Mann's work, not in Michael Mann's actual chart or any of his publications. Michael Mann did not make this. He did not write the report. So he should not be held responsible for this, at least as far as Steyn has shown. And in fact, if Steyn wants to criticize Michael Mann for this graph in some way, that's fine, but he needs to explain what Michael Mann's involvement with the graph was and how it was bad. The fact somebody else took Michael Mann's work and misrepresented it in no way means Steyn is justified in saying Michael Mann committed fraud. Of course, there were still a couple outstanding issues, such as why does Michael Mann say data did not correlate and with the instrumental record, and why did Mark Steyn say data was hidden, covered up, obscured, whatever, that they were trying to hide the fact that data did not correlate. To see that, we can look at this graph here. This is just an image I pulled off the internet. But somebody decided to make a comparison showing this WMO graph without the spliced on instrumental record or any other tricks, basically showing it how it should have been shown. And what we see when we look over here is they confirm what we realized with Michael Mann's chart also applies to the green line from Briffa and the red line from Jones, which is the modern instrumental record was spliced onto all three proxy reconstructions. And even worse, what we can see is if we check this green line, Briffa's line, there should have been data going downward at the end, but this was removed from the graph. And if you really, really squint, you can see the same is true for the Jones line, but it's a lot harder to see. The data in it after 1980 was deleted. The data after 1960 in Briffa's line were deleted, and then in both cases, the modern instrumental record was spliced onto the new ending point, effectively replacing the proxy record with the instrumental record, and then the final result was displayed as a single line. And this is what is referred to, if you've ever heard the phrase, hide the decline. That hide the decline is referring to the deletion of this green line's endpoint, as well as this red line's endpoint. In other words, data from, what are the papers? Data from Jones et al. 1998 and data from Briffa 1999 were deleted and replaced with instrumental record. And then the modern instrumental record was also grafted onto Michael Mann's paper. But all of this was done by a guy named Phil Jones. He was the one responsible for this, not Michael Mann. Why then does Mark Steyn criticize Michael Mann for Michael Mann having his work misrepresented? I don't know. It's a really, really stupid mistake, and I honestly have no explanation for it. Anyone who looked at this graph, who just glanced at Michael Mann's famous hockey stick reconstruction, the one that Mark Steyn said is fraudulent, would see there are clearly two separate lines with two separate colors representing two separate things. Everything Mark Steyn has said in his deposition about this issue seems to be nothing more than him confusing this chart with this chart. Maybe there's some other explanation. If so, I have no idea what it is, but I would really like to hear it because this is a really troubling situation. And I think that's all I'm really going to say for the moment. Before I wrap up, though, I want to make it clear, normally criticizing someone's work is perfectly fine and legal. The issue in this case is Michael Mann claims he was defamed by Mark Steyn's criticism of him. Defamation requires a person make provably false statements of fact, which means if the courts decide what you say is either true, thus not provably false, or that what you say is an opinion, and thus not a fact, you're fine. This means to win his case, Michael Mann needs to show what Steyn said had factual connotations and is in fact false. Moreover, because Mann is a public figure, he also needs to prove Steyn either knew what he said was false or acted with reckless disregard for that possibility. That's difficult to do. It's very difficult to prove what someone else does or does not believe at any point, but Steyn's deposition may well have created some ammunition with which Michael Mann's lawyers can do so. After all, if Steyn gets such a basic fact wrong, it does call into the question whether or not he even looked at the work he is criticizing. And I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I don't want I like free speech. I would normally defend a person's right to criticize someone else's work. But in this case, I'm struggling to imagine what Mark Steyn's defense is going to be. If every time he opens his mouth to talk about why he thinks the hockey stick is fraudulent, he says things that are so completely and utterly false, as, like in this case, what defense can he offer? I mean, at this point, it seems to me, his best option may be to get up on the witness stand and say, well, you see, I'm an idiot. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give legal advice, but I think Steyn really, really needs help here. Otherwise, he's probably going to lose his lawsuit.